A police officer in suburban Atlanta dies after being shot while serving a warrant on a drug suspect. It sounds like a rare occurrence, but instances like these are happening all around the country. Places like Maryland, where two sheriff's deputies died after a man opened fire yesterday in a crowded restaurant inside a shopping center. Both Deputy Patrick Daly, a 30-year veteran of the force and a former Marine, and Deputy Mark Loxton, a 16-year veteran, as well as an Army veteran, died as a result of their wounds. Police killed the suspect. Now over to California, where a county sheriff's deputy and a pilot died after their plane crashed into the side of a mountain. Deputy Scott Ballantyne and sheriff's pilot James Chavez had just finished assisting officers on the ground with an arrest. Officer Jason Mosner put his life on the line when trying to end a standoff with a domestic violence suspect. The 33-year-old officer was shot in Fargo, North Dakota. Doctors don't expect him to live. The suspect was later found dead inside of the house.
All right, Miranda, thanks for that. And joining me right now, former Assistant Director of the FBI, Ron Hosko, also the President of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. Also joining us, former NYPD Detective Tom Ruskin, and Tom Whatley, a retired police detective from Delray Beach, Florida. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Good to be with you. Thank you for having us.
Ron, let's start with you. When we see a week like this, a lot of people who don't know any members of law enforcement don't realize how these incidents impact police officers, not just around the country, but also around the world sometimes. Why is it such a fraternity, and why don't most people understand that?
Well, I think that you have officers who are with each other for long shifts in very dangerous circumstances. You can sometimes equate that to combat overseas, and you do tend to form these bonds that are incredibly close. There is a brotherhood and sisterhood across law enforcement in America and around the globe, and it is a very painful event. When you hear about the families, how families are torn apart. I know in several of these cases, officers had 2 kids, 3 kids. It is just heartrending to see and to be a participant in.
Tom Ruskin, when we hear about these domestic violence incidents, this is something that I've heard from a lot of police officers, that they're increasingly seeing more and more of it, and they get increasingly violent. How real is this threat for police officers when they go thinking they're breaking up a husband and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend from fighting, but things can spiral out of control so quickly?
One of the most dangerous calls a police officer can make is a domestic violence. And it's nothing new. I mean, when I was a young cop, in the police academy, they taught you that domestic violence, you can't take your eyes off of each of the parties, because even though they hate each other and even though they may want to hurt each other, they don't want to see the other party, husband or wife, be arrested. And one of the incidents that I remember responding to is a police officer who was making an arrest of a husband who had abused his wife. The wife pushed the police officer, a mirror cracked, and it cut the officer's femur and femoral artery, and he ended up dying from bleeding out of his body.
Again, I think this is a threat that a lot of people who don't know anyone in law enforcement, they don't really think about how dangerous these situations can be. Now also, Tom Whatley, yesterday the Department of Justice announced it is suing the city of Ferguson after the city council rejected an agreement offer. Here is Attorney General Loretta Lynch.
Our investigation uncovered a community in distress in which residents felt alienated from their own police force and their own local government.
Tom Whatley, can you give us an idea of what you think morale must be like on the Ferguson Police Department today?
Well, sometimes, you know, with keeping the language clean, you're darned if you do and darned if you don't. Some officers may even feel, you know, do I really need to get out of my car and do what used to be called a Terry search or a pat down of an individual? Officers need to still stay steadfast in what they're doing, but it's, you know, with regard to Loretta Lynch, you know, sometimes when the government gives you unfunded mandates and they do it and they want it done in a quick amount of time, it's fiscally not possible sometimes to get it done in the time that they require it. So I would suspect if they get a little help from the government in this, perhaps they could speed things up with the requirements in the lawsuit.
Ron, we've talked about the Ferguson effect here a lot. The way the Obama Justice Department has handled Ferguson, the way the administration has dealt with other police matters, do you see that having a lasting effect after he leaves office?
I do. You know, the cost of these involvements with DOJ on patterns and practices investigations are immense, and Ferguson is starting to, bend under the weight of that. They apparently agreed, the Ferguson City Council agreed to the settlement with a couple of amendments, and that's where DOJ objected. The estimates are in the millions of dollars. I don't know how the citizens of Ferguson are going to, bear up under the strain of these massive costs of what the Department of Justice is proposing. And this is hitting other cities around the country as well. DOJ is going to come into your town, and they may not leave for 7 or 8 years at a massive expense.
That is a massive cloud hanging over a lot of police who are trying to do their jobs. I also wanted to follow up with all you guys about this Beyonce halftime controversy. Today in Detroit, the police chief there, James Craig, announced that a sergeant is under investigation. According to Fox affiliate WJBK, the unnamed sergeant posted a meme showing Beyonce's dancers on the top of a picture and hooded Klansmen on the bottom. It says, quote, "If the dance troupe at the top is okay for this year's halftime show, then the one at the bottom should be okay for next year." Right? Well, obviously none of you guys would condone this type of behavior, but what do you say to a lot of your fellow police officers who are frustrated, who may be tempted to speak out when they are frustrated by something like Beyonce's halftime show? First to you, Tom Whatley.
Well, first of all, regulating an officer's speech off duty can be a dubious task. However, there's a certain code of conduct that you must instill. They are allowed to attack us on social media and do all kind of memes and the militarization of police departments. But when you're working for a government agency, you really have to be careful about how you address yourself out there. And there is a fine line between free speech, freedom of expression, and freedom of association. You have to be very careful with that as a law enforcement officer, because you are in the public eye, but the public is not in the public eye when they make up memes on Facebook, such as.
Yeah, 30 seconds left. Last word to you, Tom Ruskin. I mean, you can understand the frustration for a lot of these officers, but they can't take the bait from the other guys who are trolling cops online, right?
They can't, but police officers are used to dealing with these type of things. As I've said before, police officers are the only occupation who are going to walk and protect the rights of people, demonstrating, saying, what do we want? Dead cops, when do we want it? Now. And it's a police officer's job to protect them and their right to free speech.
It's got to be the most difficult job, I think, in the world. Gentlemen, great to talk to you all. Ron Hosko, Tom Ruskin, Tom Whatley, a pleasure to speak with you all. Just ahead here on Newsmax Now, a rare sight reaches the surface after being buried underwater for 500 years. Submerged, maybe I should say. See the latest discovery that everyone is talking about. And South Carolina is known for making headlines of its own when it comes to politics. We'll ask our roundtable about the snake pit that is South Carolina.